What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here, and today we're doing the review of the Nike Metcon 7. Alright guys, so I've had these shoes for about a week now, and to me that's a pretty short amount of time to be doing a review after. But in that week, I've done pretty much everything that you would want to do in a pair of training shoes, so I have some pretty strong opinions about the Nike Metcon 7. But with that, I still will probably do some kind of like long-term update, maybe 3 months, maybe even just like a month after using the Nike Metcon 7. But like I said, I've done quite a bit already in these shoes. I've been doing like 2-a-days all week. I did kind of have a little knee injury, but it wasn't too bad. I still am able to work out and test these shoes. So with all that testing, I did some squats, I did some deadlifts, I did some running, rope climbs, shoulder overhead, clean and jerk snatches. I did just about everything. So first off, let's take a look at the construction of the Nike Metcon 7s, which actually use the same upper that was on the free Metcon 1s called the chain link mesh. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I thought that this upper was comfortable, it's flexible, it's breathable, and I still see people using the free Metcon 1s and 2s all the time. So durability seems to be a strong suit for this upper. On top of it, it does have some more overlays compared to the original free Metcon 1s, which were designed a little bit more towards flexibility, whereas the Metcon 7 or the flagship Metcon line is going to be more of your stable shoe. So on the lateral side, there's some polyurethane overlays on top of that chain link mesh, and then the swoosh is part of that overlay system. Obviously on the side, you're gonna see the huge lateral sidewalls that rise up from the outsole. And then on the toe box, there's a little bit of more reinforcement there. If you go on Nike's customizer, that part right there is called toe skin. And then when we get to the medial side, you see the biggest eyesore on the Metcon 7, which is the medial rope guard. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but obviously it sticks out pretty badly. And then on the instep of the shoe, there's another raised lateral or medial sidewall. And then when we get to the back part of the shoe, there's a synthetic area, it's like a synthetic leather or something. That's customizable as well on Nike's customizer. And then this little back strap right here, which is the midsole of the shoe because it's now built into the shoe and not a drop-in midsole. And the midsole is actually made out of Nike's high energy return ETPU foam called React. You might have heard of it before. They actually used it in the Metcon React Turbos earlier this year and the Nike Metcon Reacts from last year. And I think it's a welcome addition to the flagship Metcon line. To stabilize the back part of the shoe, where the midsole is, there's also this TPU clip that on certain models just kind of blends in, or certain colorways it just kind of blends in, but on this white colorway it's black, and then the React foam is this gray part right here. And then we also have a change to the Hyperlift, which they still call the Hyperlift, but is completely different in the application this year. So last year, it was the little inserts that you would put inside under the drop-in midsole to give you a little bit more heel boost. On this year's shoe, it's actually this hard piece of TPU plastic that is in the heel, which kind of makes these shoes like an Ollie lifter. But the way that this heel is made to perform differently than your standard like Ollie lifter heel is that this one actually has air between the bottom of it and the top of it. So it's made to flex. Now in my actual testing, I never really noticed it flexing. And if you were to put like compression down top to bottom, it wouldn't compress. I mean, the grooves are on the outside of it, so maybe torsionally you get a little bit of flex if you were like running, but top to bottom, there's really no compressing this. So on the bottom of the shoe, we have a completely new outsole that has a really heavy rubber. This stuff is thick, it's really grippy, it feels extremely durable, and in the week that I've used these, there's really nowhere, maybe a little bit here at the heel, but otherwise, I mean, it looks like it's brand new on the bottom. It still has the texture and everything. The outsole shape on the Metcon 7 is kind of similar to what it was on the 5s and 6s. It has some extended points on the lateral and medial sides of the heel to give you more contact area with the ground. And overall, the heel area is probably about 10 to 15% bigger than it was on the Metcon 5s and 6s, which I really like about this shoe. You're going to notice that immediately when you start lifting in the Metcon 7s. In the mid part of the shoe, there is that same kind of traction that extends from the heel to the toe, and then on the sides of the midfoot of the shoe, there's obviously your rope guard, or the place that you're going to channel the rope through when you're doing rope climbs. And then there's some cushioning at the forefoot. And at the forefoot of this shoe, compared to the previous models, there's actually breaks in the outsole that show the midsole so that you get more forefoot flexibility out of the Metcon 7s. The benefit of having it like that is, compared to the previous model, which was a single piece outsole, is that at some point, the single piece outsole would stop flexing, and then that's how you would get that heel slip. On the Metcon 7s, I never noticed any kind of heel slip with these shoes. So now let's go back to the upper of these shoes and talk about the tongue and lacing system. So you have Nike's fly wire on the lateral side, and then on the medial side of the shoe, there are some tabs on the inside here that you lace your laces through. And that, to me, is the only part of the shoe that has a little bit of worrisome durability. I've actually seen people lace their shoes up tight, and then these tabs right here pull away from the side of the shoe. So my guess is that since that part is attached to the more rigid side where the rope guard is, the rope guard is made out of a plastic material. It's naturally going to want to resist being pulled. And I think over time that might be a problem, and that might be where that issue stems from. Another cool trick that the tongue has is that it has this tab right here that has some Velcro hook and loop attached to it. And what you're going to use that for is to secure your laces, which are the same laces that were from the 5s, the 6s, and the 4s before. So we all know that they were pretty rigid and terrible. What you're going to want to do here is you're going to tie your shoes up. From there, you're going to use that little tab to place over and stick down to cover your little knot that you've created with your laces. Now, in my actual testing, that didn't prevent the laces from coming untied. It probably will protect them, maybe for doing like rope climbs, but I think if you're not lacing your shoes up tight or double knotting, they will still become untied when running or doing double unders. So since the Metcon 7s are more of a traditionally made shoe this year, there's no more drop-in midsole. So if you have orthotics, you can just take out the insole, which is anatomic, and provides really good underfoot cushioning, and slide your orthotics in there. And another huge change that Nike made with the Metcon 7s is that they supposedly now have a 7mm drop as opposed to the traditional 4mm drop from before. Now, in my testing, I didn't really notice that these had a higher heel than any of the previous Metcons. It actually felt like these had a lower heel than the previous Metcons. When I put both of them on side by side, I didn't really notice any differences. When I put the Metcon Flyknit 3s on, I did notice a difference between the heel heights, which those have a 6mm drop. When I put the Innovate G300s on, I noticed that these had a much higher heel. And then obviously when I put the Nano 7s that have a 7mm drop, I noticed that they had a much higher heel as well. So while they might have a 7mm drop, I'm not gonna refute that if that is what Nike is saying. They don't feel like they have a 7mm drop, and it's, to me, they feel flatter. They still feel like at least like they're a 4mm drop shoe. And then the weight on these, when I measured, is lighter than the outgoing Metcon 6, but not by a whole lot. I measured these at 12.5 ounces for a men's size 10, as opposed to 12.9 for a men's size 10 Metcon 6. So not a huge difference in weight, but anything is better than nothing. So when it comes to sizing your Metcon 7s, I'm going to recommend that you go with your normal training shoe size. At first, I had heard these were running a little bit on the small side, and when I first put my foot inside of them, I noticed that they were snug, which pretty much falls in line with all of Nike's training shoes as of late. They've all been very snug right off the rip, but after you break them in, I noticed that they just fit true to size. So with the Nike Metcon React Turbos, they were initially very snug, and then after you broke them in, you wore them for a little bit, they opened up a little bit, but I still think that the React Turbos are just a more form-fitting shoe than the Metcon 7s are in general. The Metcon 6s have a more open toe box than the Metcon 7s for sure. And that's the way that they are. The Metcon 7s, I don't think will ever get to the point where they have as open as a toe box as the Metcon 6s, but I still don't think that they're that much smaller than the 6s. They're probably a little bit closer to the 5s, if anything. Same story goes with the free Metcon 4s. I thought that those were more snug than the Metcon 7s, and those stayed a little bit more snug overall, even after breaking them in, but I still think that those are very comfortable shoes. The Nano 11s are a much bigger shoe than the Metcon 7s, so much so that I actually had to size the Nano 11s down over time, and I felt like the 9.5s actually fit me better in the Nano 11s. So if you have a wider foot, I think that you should be okay in the Metcon 7s. Like I said, they will be snug initially, but after you break them in, they will open up quite a bit. And at this point, I feel like these shoes fit better on my feet than pretty much any other training shoe at the moment. So when it came to running and plyometric movements, I thought that the addition of the React foam was pretty good, but I didn't think that it was a game changer in terms of like running or anything. The forefoot is pretty cushioned on these shoes, but I still think that the cushioning on the Metcon 5s and 6s was a little bit softer in the forefoot. I actually didn't care for that softness though. I thought it was a little bit too dull, a little bit too spongy, whereas on the Metcon 7s, it's a little bit more responsive and it still retains a good amount of cushioning. So if you're a forefoot, midfoot striker, I think you'll like running in the Metcon 7s a pretty good amount. I still, like I said, I think that the Metcon 6s and the Metcon 5s were a better overall running shoe. If you are a heavy heel striker, you're gonna find that running in the Metcon 7s is pretty miserable because of that hyperlift insert that's at the back of these shoes. It's just like an Ollie lifter. There's really no bending or flexing this hyperlift. And even though that it's supposed to be made to flex, torsionally it really doesn't go anywhere. Like if I stomped down as hard as I could probably make it flex, but I think under normal situations, that thing is not going anywhere. But I think over time, a lot of us have developed more of a midfoot, forefoot strike when we run in our training shoes, just because the heels are typically pretty clunky in these shoes. So if you are coming from any Metcon in the past, you're gonna feel right at home running in the Metcon 7s. I thought the forefoot flexibility on these shoes was excellent. So doing things like double unders, doing burpees, felt really comfortable. The little toe guard here helps you get traction when you're doing burpees, helps you get up a little bit faster. And then the forefoot on these shoes is cushioned from that React foam and has all of these forefoot flex grooves right here. It expands pretty well. And I thought doing longer sets of double unders was pretty comfortable to do in the Metcon 7s. When it came to lifting and stability, I thought that the Metcon 7s were probably the best Metcons to lift in of all time. This hyperlift makes these shoes as stable as a lifter with a little bit of comfort because it has that React foam right on top of it. But overall, like the stability on these shoes is excellent. The outsole rubber that they're using is really, really grippy. And I had absolutely no issues doing any of the lifts that I've been doing over the week of testing these shoes out. I back squatted 415 pounds, which is right around 95% of my 1 rep max. That's the highest number that I've ever done in a normal training shoe. I usually stop right around 405 with normal training shoes, but in this case, I felt like that these shoes were plenty stable and I never felt like I would lose out on any power using them. The heel on this shoe is extremely stiff and solid, and like I said before, they feel like they have a 4mm drop, which is generally flat for me, which is my preferred way of lifting. I don't really use Ollie lifters unless I'm doing like dedicated Ollie lifting practice, so I prefer lifting in more flatter shoes. And unlike the Nano 11s, which I noticed immediately pitched me forward, I didn't have that problem with the Metcon 7s. I thought that, if anything, I noticed myself rocking back and forth a little bit when I was just doing air squats, but under load, I never noticed any kind of shifting back and forth. I also put up a 455 3-inch deficit deadlift with these shoes on, and with deadlifting, that's a lift that I am pretty in tune with, and I would immediately notice if there was a higher heel to toe drop. But in this case, I had absolutely no issues. If you watch me on Instagram, I change my shoes all the time. I would have definitely changed my shoes if I noticed that these shoes were hard to deadlift in, and that just wasn't the case. For Olympic weightlifting and barbell cycling, I thought that these shoes were excellent as well. I did a hang power clean push jerk complex that was extremely long, and I never noticed myself getting pulled forward when I was returning my hang clean down or doing my push jerks, which I immediately noticed with the Nano 11s, and I could not do long hang clean cycles with these shoes at all. They get me too far on my toes. Whereas with the Metcon 7s, I never noticed any kind of issues with these shoes pulling me forward or getting me too far on my toes. I did some power snatching in these shoes, not super duper heavy, but somewhere around my 80%. And I felt like I was able to keep my toes and my heels down and my full foot down throughout the pull, which was not the case with the Nano 11s as well. I felt like I was either too far forward or too far back with the Nano 11s. With the Metcon 7s, I could feel like I could keep my foot completely grounded with the floor throughout the pull. So I felt like the finish with these shoes was always a lot better than with the Nano 11s. So let's finally talk about the elephant in the room, that medial rope guard. So it looks silly, but it actually works really well. I thought rope climbing in these shoes was excellent. Traction going up the rope was really good, and then traction coming down the rope was even better, almost too good coming down the rope. So initially I would keep my feet a little bit closer together to kind of channel the rope through, and I noticed that I was getting stuck coming down the rope. Like every time I would drop down, I would get caught again. So the quick fix for that was to just kind of spread my feet out a little bit further and just kind of give it a little bit more room to channel through. And I thought overall rope climbs in the Metcon 7s was excellent. I think that these might be the best rope climbing shoe just ever made. The Metcon 7s retail for $130 like pretty much every Metcon from before. So it's your standard training shoe price. The Metcon React Turbos obviously have a little bit more of a premium at $150, and then the free Metcon 4s are $120. For my money, I'm gonna say you should skip every other shoe and just go with the Metcon 7s. In my opinion, all of the upgrades and features that Nike has packed into this shoe makes it probably the best CrossFit shoe of all time. I'm gonna say CrossFit shoe right now, maybe not the best training shoe because that just really depends on your application, but for CrossFit, I think that the Metcon 7s have no rivals. Previously, I thought that the Nano 6s were probably the most well-rounded CrossFit shoe, maybe the Strike Movement Haze trainers, but for those shoes, I think that they lack a little bit of stability. Like, I think that lifting most weights in those shoes was fine. Plyometrics running were pretty good in those shoes, probably better than the Metcon 7s, but I think just the fact that these shoes are that much more stable, plus they're still really easy to live in daily. I've been wearing these shoes nonstop for the last week, coaching in them, doing pretty much everything in them, running my errands in them, lifting in them, doing 2 days, doing my normal Globo Gym stuff, CrossFit WODs, and I feel like these are plenty comfortable enough for the day-to-day, and they are excellent for training. Now, the only thing that you have to get past is the way that they look, because I know a lot of people right now don't like the way that the 7s look, but I promise you, once you get them and you start looking at them in real life, they look a lot better than they do in pictures. That rope guard over time just ends up fading away, just fades into the shoe, and you stop noticing it as much. And even on certain colorways, it's not as noticeable. So on like the grayer colorways, I've noticed that it doesn't really stick out quite as much. The red, I think, probably sticks out the most. The white kind of just blends in here. And if you can get past the styling, and if you just want to look at the shoe just from a complete functional aspect, I don't think you can do any better than the Metcon 7s. These are the best training shoes at the moment. I mean, there's no question about it. These shoes have already launched in Europe, pretty much everywhere around the world. Right now, you can buy the Matt Fraser P edition on Nike.com. I'll leave a link in the description so that you can pick those up. The actual general release, I think, is going to be the the 22nd in the United States, but don't quote me on that. I'm not so sure. For all the updates on when these actually come out, just follow me on Instagram at as many reviews as possible. And if you guys like this video, make sure that you hit that thumbs up button. Make sure that you guys have subscribed to my channel to make sure that you get all of the latest and greatest training and fitness review videos. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.